Page 646 in the Koran Siddur is chapter 2 of the Pirkei Avot, the ethics of our fathers. I've recorded it, so you can watch it on YouTube if you want, but you won't fall behind. No, okay. It's not like a chronological thing.
Ja, is dit wel op? My boodskappe is so ek agter met alles.
So the only thing, look, the Pirkei Avot is not necessarily chronological, but that first chapter does follow the rabbis almost chronologically. So it tells us how we've passed down the traditions originally from this rabbi to that rabbi to that rabbi. But don't stress, you can study them individually as well. Right, so chapter 2 is on page 646. We always start off with this quote. All of Israel have a share in the world to come, as it is said, your people are all righteous, they shall inherit the land forever. They are a shoot of my own planting. The word there, netzer. We spoke about this on Wednesday night with the class, netzer, for the netzerim. They're a shoot of my own planting, a work of my own hands, that I may be glorified. Right, so chapter 2. Let's hear what they have to say. First one is from Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, Judah the Prince. Very prominent rabbi, by the way, Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi. He said, what is the right path that a person should choose for himself? The end one or the end two? Whatever is honorable to one who chooses it, and honorable in the eyes of others. That's what you should choose. Not just about yourself, think about others. Be as meticulous in the observance of a minor mitzvah as you are in a major one, for you do not know the reward for each mitzvah. Against the loss that fulfilling a mitzvah may entail, reckon its reward, and against the benefit a transgression may bring, reckon the loss that it involves. You must reflect on three things, he said, and you will not fall into transgression. Know what is above you, a seeing eye, a hearing ear, and a book in which all your deeds are written. Spoke about it this morning, Every single careless word that you utter in this world, you're going to have to give an accounting for, because it's all recorded in the big journal in heaven.
Yes, I was thinking this week in my age it got tough.
In your age?
It gets tough.
It gets tough.
The longer list.
Oh, the list, yeah, they're running out of ink.
I hope not.
You know, last week as well, we read that Mishnah from, was it Shimon ben Gamliel, who said, I spent my whole life growing up among the sages, and I learned the best thing is silence. Now, I stand here and I do the prayers, and I have to talk, and I do all the leading of all the stuff, and I think to myself, I've probably only got so many words I've got in my lifetime. And look at me, you guys get to sit here silently if you want. But I have to say everything. I'm going to run out of words soon. My counter is over there.
That's why he's going to get very old because he doesn't talk.
He's going to get very old because he doesn't talk. Fantastic. It's the elixir of life.
Silence. The elixir of life. I've got so many words left.
Well, science disagrees because women.
Science disagrees. Yeah, women live longer than men and they talk much more. 100%. Yeah, but you know why women live longer than men? Because men don't want to. You try living with one. Alright, so here's the commentary.
Idle words.
Idle words, yes. Okay, so notice there that in the Siddur, it puts his name in brackets. Judah the Prince, Judah Nasi. That's because this is such a prominent rabbi that is literally just called rabbi. Throughout the Talmud, if it says rabbi said, it's referring to this rabbi. And we've got tons of famous rabbis in the Talmud. He is Yehuda Hanasi. He's the one that compiled the Mishnah for us in the Talmud. So he's extremely important. And majority of the rulings that we find in the Talmud, not that the Talmud's got final rulings, but majority of the opinions that we find in the Talmud are usually his, because his disciple, I think it was, what's his name? Rabbi Yochanan, I think it was, is the one that we're constantly learning about, because it's his disciple. So, very interesting guy. So, he said, be careful with a minor mitzvah as you are with a major one, for you do not know the reward of the mitzvot. So here's the commentary. Pious fools and wise sinners, labels created by Solomon ibn Gabriel, are those Jews who are tempted to pick and choose their mitzvahs, as if it's off of a supermarket shelf. They caused Menachem Mendel of Kotz to point to the Torah that warns us not to turn God's commandments into idols. You've heard of not doing idolatry? He says you can even turn the mitzvahs into idols themselves. That's my child. My wife there. I hope so. Okay. In short, do not let motivation discriminate between your good deeds. Mitzvahs should have no material consequences, but technically, this Mishnah then seems incorrect. Why? Because not all mitzvahs are created equal. Some do have bigger rewards, more lucrative rewards than others, such as the prolonging of your days. There's certain commandments that says you keep this commandment, your days will be lengthened. Okay, and that sounds fantastic, right? If you got good medical aid, of course. One of these is, for example, the mitzvah of Shiluach HaKen. Shiluach HaKen is not playing with a Bobby doll with Ken. Shiluach HaKen is to not remove the unhatched eggs or baby chicks while the mother bird is still in the nest, or having honest weights. To which Rashi adds his famous word that if for the fulfillment of such an easy mitzvah God promises you with the reward of long life, how much greater is the reward for fulfilling the more difficult mitzvahs then? Because this is literally one of the smallest commandments in the entire Torah. Right? So our rabbis actually went and looked at these and said, which one is the biggest one? Which one is the smallest one? And they saw this one is probably the smallest, easiest commandment in the entire Torah. Chase away the mother bird. What's the most difficult one in the entire Torah? Honoring your parents. Any of you that have ever had to look after your parents in an old age home that are no longer corpus mentis, they've got dementia, they have to wear adult nappies, these kind of stuff, you'll know that's probably one of the hardest things in this world as well. What's the reward for doing that? The exact same. Long life. So the smallest mitzvah and the biggest mitzvah have the same reward. But in a startling admonition, the rabbis of the Mishnah warn that Jews who associate this last mitzvah with divine compassion must be silenced. Why? Because, explains the Yosef Bar Zavida, in doing so they are representing all of God's traits as compassion, whereas all of his commandments are not just compassion, but they are decrees. This is the general rabbinic attitude. No attempt should be made to apply logic or reason for a mitzvah, even when it has an obvious moral basis. For example, kosher. Why do we keep kosher? Some people out there like to say, oh, it's more healthy, etc., etc. No, come look at my fridge, look at my weight, look at my body. Ask my GP. I'm fully kosher and I'm definitely not healthy. Right? So that's nonsense. It's not supposed to it's not supposed to have a rational reason behind it. We do the commandments because God said so. Be holy as I am holy. Right? They don't have to have rational reasons behind it. The rational reason is because God said so. Obedience is the only rational reason that is behind it. Okay, so when it comes to reading Parashat Yitro, the rabbi gives a forceful Shabbat Devar Torah on those 10 commandments up there, right? You guys name them. I am the Lord your God. Don't take my name in vain. Honor your father and your mother. Oh wait, I skip one. Keep the Sabbath. Don't kill. Don't steal. Don't do adultery. Don't covet your neighbor's stuff. Don't lie. False testimony. So he goes and gives a drush on all 10 of those commandments. When he finishes his sermon, Beryl turns to his friend and says, well, at least I've never made a graven image. Somebody lost the phone here. Let's see if we can see a picture on it. There's a quote from Joshua 1 verse 9. No idea. They'll phone it later. Thanks, Brighton. A spiritual person. Right, so he says, I've looked at those 10 commandments. At least I haven't made a graven image. This is yours. There you go. It's another one of the smallest mitzvahs in the Torah is to return something that's lost. Okay, Mishnah number 2. Rabban Gamliel, son of Rabbi Yehuda Anasi, said, it is good to combine your Torah study with a worldly occupation, for the effort involved in both makes one forget sin. Torah study without an occupation will in the end fail and lead to sin. And all who work for the community should do so for the sake of heaven, for their ancestral merit will support them and their righteousness endures forever. And as for you, God will say, I count you worthy of a great reward, as though you yourselves had accomplished it all. So if you do something for the community without expecting reward, Hashem says, I'm counting it as if you've accomplished all 613 commandments of the Torah. That's a big statement, eh? Right, so you can't stay unemployed and try to stay religious. Can you retire and stay religious?
Oh, I need to retire my car.
Yes, you can retire, man. There's laws in the Torah about the priests, right? So the priests can only work in the temple till a certain age, but they don't stop being involved in the temple. They continue like mentoring and teaching the younger ones what to do, but they do get to retire.
That's why they retire.
Said about what? The fire? Refire, yeah. Not retire, but refire. Alright, so Mishnah number 2. He says that exertion in Torah and work make one forget sin. When in the early days of the Mizrahi movement, the rabbis at a conference in Vienna in 1925 were searching for a motto to describe their ideology. They adopted the slogan Torah va'avodah, Torah and labor. They understood that 6 days you shall work, the commandment, meant that 6 days of human exertion were obligatory to earn the means to acquire your food, your clothing, your shelter, as expressed in the terms of Shabbos Shabboson, which means a ceasing of ceasing. That is why the Torah, which minces no words, lumped the 6 days of labor together as a single unit. It calls it Sheshes Yamim, as opposed to the plural, which would have been Shisha Yamim, implying that the 6 days be considered as one work unit of time, as opposed to the staggered work days, allowing one to decide when you can work and when not to work. You're supposed to work for 6 days and then rest. There's a whole halacha about this in the Talmud. If you end up falling out of an airplane and landing on an island in the desert and you forgot when is Shabbat, how do you know when to keep Shabbat? Must you count 6 days and then keep Sabbath, or do you keep Sabbath and then count 6 days? And there's a bunch of differing opinions with that. Both Rashi and Rambam consider it a serious halachic duty to teach one's children an ominous a profession, even on a Shabbos. Along comes the Rabbi Dostai ben Yanai, a 2nd century sage, with a stunning declaration. He says, the Jew who doesn't work during the week is more likely to be a Sabbath violator. Come with the excuse that, oh no, I'm not going to work too hard in the week because I want to keep Shabbat. When Shabbat comes around, you're going to end up violating the Shabbat because you've been practicing all week. You're not taking a break. You're not ceasing. If you're ceasing during the week, why would you cease on the Shabbat? That's why we have the commandment to work 6 days. Ben Yanai's logic, what is this? Suppose a man sits idle all week long and on the Sabbath eve discovers that he's got nothing to eat. He might go and fall in with a troop of bandits. Then he would be seized and taken in chains and put to work on the Sabbath. All this because he would not work during the 6 days of labor. There's another famous verse, I'm trying to think where it is. It's our apostles that say it, isn't it? That if a man does not go to work for 6 days of the week, he's worse than an unbeliever. Is it in Timothy? I think it's in Timothy. Right.
If you don't provide for your family.
That one, yeah. Providing for your family. I think it's in Timothy. All right. So here's the joke. Moshe and Yosela pass a Baptist church and see a sign on the marquee that says, come inside and convert. We'll give you $400 on the spot. Mo says to Joe, wait outside. I'm going to go and try that. So Yosele paces outside for nearly an hour long, up and forward, backwards and forwards. And then he bangs on the church's big wooden door. Finally, Moshe sticks his head out the window. No, says Yosele, did you get the money? His friend replies, is that all you Jews think about?
Yo! Powerful conversion.
Hopefully we can get a good Jewish Pope next week, eh? All right. Is that all you Jews can think about? All right. Mishnah number 3. Be wary in your dealings with the ruling power. Okay, don't become chummies with the ANC. Oh, what does it say about the GNU?
Oh, directly after occupation. Occupation.
Yeah, be wary in your dealings with the ruling power, for they only befriend a man when it serves their needs. When it is to their advantage, they appear as friends, but they do not stand by a person in his hour of need. Scalams. I wonder what the Jews that are in the GNU are thinking about it reading this Mishnah this week. Shame. All right, so the care of human life and happiness, wrote Thomas Jefferson, and not their destruction is the first and only object of good government. The care of human life and happiness. Thomas Jefferson probably read this Mishnah, one that shows extreme skepticism of the government, authority, and career politicians. The more civil service, the less civil servants. A continuation of our sages' previous suspicion that to despise high position, and a healthy lesson learned straight from the Torah when it says, a new but well-entrenched tyrant king arose over Egypt who did not know Joseph. You thought it was good because we got a new king? He's going to be just as bad as the previous one. It's the same with all the Herods as well, eh? All those Herodians and the priests that were arriving during the Second Temple period. It was just one worse after the other, until Nero came along and messed everything up. The heavens obviously prefer rule by piety to rule by royalty. They look to an educated judge, shorn of pretensions and pomposity, and a king of humility, restraint, and dignity, approved not by the people, but by God. Perhaps the Yiddishists had this in mind in their disdain for elections, which they say, elections bring out new thieves to run against old crooks. That's brilliant. New thieves that run against old crooks. There you go. How many people did we have in the last election? How many parties were there? We're running out of paper in the country, just printing everything. Jeez, it's ridiculous, eh? New thieves against old crooks. And since the welfare of God's chosen depends upon the welfare of a strict law and ordered government, the Jews offered sacrifices for the government's success in the temple. The precursor of today's God Bless the Queen in our Shabbos prayers as well. Okay, here's the joke. Chaim is unable to decide on a career, so his worried parents devise a plan to test him. They put $10 inside his Bible and a bottle of whiskey on the kitchen table, and then they hide in the cupboard, leaving the Bible and the whiskey on the table. If he takes the cash, he's going to be a businessman, the father says. And if he takes the Chumash, the Bible, he'll become a rabbi. But what if he takes the bottle of whiskey? Well, then I'm afraid our son is going to end up being a drunkard. So Chaim comes home, walks into the kitchen, and first flips through the Chumash a little bit. Then immediately slips the $10 and the whiskey bottle into his pockets and leaves. Oy vey, the father says as he slaps his forehead. It's even worse than I imagined. What do you mean? His scared wife asks. Our son's going to become a politician. Here's another one for this Mishnah. Okay, so does Jewish rule favor decentralized authority? The answer is yes. In the Torah portion on justice and judges, Parashat Shoftim, the branches of judicial and legislative power in government are divided. The administrative duties being broken into two categories of magistrate, the shofet and the official, the shoter, with justice system that is clearly decentralized. It says, establish courts in all communities throughout your tribes, which is the forerunner of today's Beit Din structure. Despite the Mishnah's cynical attitude towards government, respect for government has always been part of Jewish ethics, as articulated by the Proverbs, where it says, my son, fear God and fear the king. Jeremiah says, seek the well-being of the city, for in its peace you shall have peace. By Ezra, who asked the Jews to pray for Cyrus. The Apocrypha tell us, it records how the Jews made a sacrificial offering for the ruling king. Philo tells us of the prayers for the Roman emperors, and in modern times by the British chief rabbi Lord Jacobowitz, who presented the Queen with a framed copy of the Jews' royal prayer from 5 generations of British kings and queens. I never knew that. So he gave the Queen a framed copy of the prayer. That's pretty cool. According to the Rambam, a sage gave more value to a country than a king did. But for the Yiddishists, pragmatism ruled. They said, be sure you have the backing of your equals before you stir up your superiors. Here's the joke. A Washington politician and a Czech consul, or Czech Republic, a Czech consul are walking in the woods, when suddenly they bump into 2 huge bears, one male and one female. Who would win between one man and 100 gorillas? This is the Jewish version of that story. As the unfortunate consul, the Czech consul, is being eaten by the male bear, the politician runs back into town and tells the sheriff's office about his Czech friend. The sheriff grabs his gun and they both run back to find the bear still lurking around. He's inside of that one, yells the politician, pointing to the male bear. The sheriff immediately shoots the female bear. What did you do that for? I said he was in the other one. Exactly, says the sheriff. And would you believe a politician who told you the Czech was in the male? That was clever. All right, 2.4, I don't have commentary here, so we'll skip number 4, we'll just read it. He used to say, do his will as if it was yours, so that he may do your will as if it was his. Yes, measure for measure, hey? Set aside your will for the sake of his, that he may set aside the will of others before yours. Okay, Mishnah number 5, Hillel, the great Hillel. He said, do not separate yourself from the community. Do not be sure of yourself until the day you die. Do not judge your fellow until you have stood in his place. Do not say anything that cannot be understood at once in the hope that it will eventually be understood. You know, these cryptic statements that people make. And do not say, I will study when I have time, for you may never have the time. Last week we learned from old Hillel. What did he say? If not now, when? All right, so let's read here. 2.5. Page 39. Here we go. All right, so Hillel said, do not separate yourself from the community. The message of this Mishnah is that hermits and holiness don't mix. Or as the poet John Donne said, no man is an island entire of itself. Hillel wanted Jews to identify with the community, to strengthen their unity and solidarity, to share in its weal or woe. Is there a specific mitzvah that a person should involve themselves in with communal matters? No. Nevertheless, the Rambam doesn't hesitate to define anyone who distances himself from other Jews as being outside of the Jewish pale. But what if the community is corrupt? Ah, says Rabbi Yonah, when the Jew must live in solitude, a directive not shared by many a Hasidic Rebbe, those who think that they can live without others are wrong. But those who think that others cannot survive without them are even more in error. You've got to be the light. So if there's a corrupt community and that's the only community there is, you need to go there and fix that community. When the community is suffering, one's not allowed to say, I'm going to go to my house, eat and drink, and I will be fine. Which is in direct contradiction to the golden Jewish rule and the most famous of all of our ethical mitzvahs, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. This 5-word directive was embraced by Rabbi Akiva, who declared it the fundamental principle of the Torah. Zeh klal gadol b'Torah. We teach our kids to sing this song. Anyway, so Judah sings the song quite often. Meanwhile, the Midrash defines those who leave the community as the wicked sons. And Ibn Ezra, the 12th century author of the Shirash Israel, is brutally poetic. He says, the wolf grabs the sheep that strays away from the flock. So Larry shows up at the synagogue on Rosh Hashanah and tries to walk into the sanctuary, but the usher stops him and asks him for his ticket. Larry protests, I just need to talk to Barry for a moment and then I'll come out again. The usher insists that Larry needs to have a ticket to come inside, but Larry stresses that he didn't come to take part in the Rosh Hashanah service. He only needs to talk to Barry for a second. To tell you the truth, he says, it's about a business matter. The usher still says no, and Larry pleads, saying, I'll come right back out after I've told him. The usher hems and haws and finally relents, saying, okay, you're allowed to go into the shul just for a minute, but don't let me catch you praying. Mm-hmm. That's funny, eh? Have you seen this before? People that aren't religious, that pitch up at religious services for other stuff. It's the weirdest thing to experience. It's mind-boggling. Anyway, Mishnah number 6. He used to say, an uncouth person cannot be sin-fearing, nor can an ignoramus be pious. A shy person cannot learn, nor can an impatient one teach. I'm going to go to Judah's teachers this week and quote this. A person overoccupied in business does not always become wise. In a place where there are no worthy people, you should strive to be worthy. Right, let's see the commentary on this one. Be a mensch. Have you ever heard that word mensch? So it's a Yiddish word. It's the same as Afrikaans. Yes, a mens. Be a proper person. Be a mensch. In this Mishnah, one of Hilal's most famous sayings, the Hebrew word ish can either be construed as be a mensch or be a leader. The Torah repeatedly emphasizes the concept of menschlichkeit, doing the right thing. This attitude, the Netziv sees in our forefathers, making them deserving of the title Yasharim, the straight ones. That is to say, they conducted their lives in an absolutely straight manner. Just like we say Yashar Koyach, or we call our forefathers the Yasharim. Sometimes on an even higher moral plane than the Jewish law actually requires from them. What's an example of this? Abraham, when he tried to save Lot. He had no halachic obligation to put himself or his men in a position vulnerable to attack, much more powerful kings. Meanwhile, if you prefer to translate the word ish as leader instead of mensch, you're presented with the enormous challenge to become one if the circumstances demands it. This is dicey. Very few people have leadership qualities, and among those who do, very few can necessarily lead responsibly. If we all pulled in one direction, goes the Yiddish adage, the world would fall over. In cases where there is where there's a drought of leadership, the Meiri warns the Jews not to suddenly develop excessive humility. Excessive humility, states the Proverbs, is a sign of a scoundrel. So what makes a leader? Rebbe Nachman of Bratslav thought that when a person is capable of smiling while he's being abused, he is acceptable to become a leader. Rabbi Mendel of Kotz concluded that fanatics should not be leaders of Israel. The Talmudic sage Judah ben Ezekiel warned that leadership shortens your life. The Midrash was blunt. It said, when the shepherd blunders and loses his way, his flock blunders after him. Who would want to be a leader? But if there is no leader, be one. The new head of the community, the Rosh Kehillah, was asked to give the Yom Kippur Drash. And as he spoke, he noticed a little old Jewish lady behind the curtain bowing every time he mentioned the name of Satan. After the davening, the perplexed leader went over to her and asked her, Ma'am, Geveret, why is it that you bow every time I mention the name of Satan? Well, she replied softly, you know, politeness costs nothing, and you never know where I'm going to end up. Oh, brilliant. Wat is het Afrikaans voorbrand? Isn't that what it's called? Okay, Mishnah number 7. Oh, here's this one story. This sounds like old Hamlet and what's his name? Number 7. Seeing a skull floating on the water, he said. So he was holding the skull, I'm guessing, and talking to the skull, I don't know. Because you drowned others, they drowned you. And those who drowned you will themselves eventually be drowned. What a weird story. Okay, so let's see what the commentary says about this. Was it Hamlet? No, it wasn't Hamlet. Where's the one where he talks to the... Who's Hamlet?
Alas, poor Yorick. I knew him well.
184. Here we go. The superior crown. Yeah. All right. In this Mishnah, Hillel identifies. No, that's not right. I can read this one to you anyway. So there's one where Hillel says, it might be the next one, where Hillel says, one who acquires a good name acquires it for himself. No, that's not yet. No, let's keep it then. All right, don't worry. Sometimes these versions of the Pirkei Avot have got different numberings. That always makes it confusing. All right, we'll go to Mishnah number 8. He used to say, the more flesh, the more worms. Is that a church bell that I hear?
Yeah.
Hey, somebody's getting married. My mom originally wanted to actually, she thought, before we built the shul here, she always thought we were going to end up buying that church on the corner there. I thought to myself, when can we use the bell in Shabbat service? We can't do that, can we? Well, maybe Rosh Hashanah instead of the shofar. Put a shofar up there. Okay, so Mishnah 8, he used to say, the more flesh, the more worms, the more possessions, the more worries, the more wives, the more witchcraft. The more, sorry about that. The more maidservants, the more lewdness. The more menservants, the more robbery. The more Torah, the more life. You see how it switches here. The more study, the more wisdom. The more counsel, the more understanding. The more charity, the more peace. Whoever acquires a good name acquires something for himself. Whoever acquires for himself words of Torah acquires for himself life in the world to come. Right, so let's see what he says about this. In this Mishnah, Hillel identifies a good name as something that needs to be acquired and can never be transferred to another. And yet this earned name, notes Pinchas ben Chama, is much more than the given name. Kohelet, Ecclesiastes notes that every man has got 3 names. One that his father and mother gave him, one that others call him, and one that he acquires himself. Adam gave names to the animals that define their qualities, and Judaism relates to names not as mere arbitrary designations, but as clues that determine destiny and define one's persona. Kishma ken hu, we say, as is his name, so is he. Right? So what did Adam call the dog? Kelev. What does that mean? My heart. My heart's a pinty winky. Right? There you go. Good. There's some funny names. If Israel was here today, Israel was here this morning, we should have asked him about the names of insects. It's hilarious. A praying mantis is called a Gamal Shlomo, Solomon's camel. What's a ladybird in Hebrew? It's also got a funny name. So it's got all these biblical names. It's got these funny names in Hebrew. We're going to, just for fun, go through them this afternoon.
So Adam knew about Shlomo.
Yeah. Then knew about Solomon. A praying mantis was a davening mantis. Isha Kanav, yeah. Okay, remember it was the mothers, not the father nor God, who bestowed the names on Jacob's 11 children. And unlike today's custom of naming children after the ancestors, the early Torah practice was to give a child a name reflective of hope or linked to the state of nurturing mother's mind. For example, Reuben's name is based on the word to see, re'eh. Shimon's name is based on the word shema, to hear. And when Rachel's second boy is born, the mother, who dies in childbirth, names him Benoni, because it's a distressful place. Ben-Oni, the son of my distress. So what is there in a name? There's plenty in a name. So one who acquires a good name acquires it for himself. There's your name your parents gave you, but then there's your reputation that you build up through life as well. That's also part of your Shem, your name. So whenever the Bible talks about doing stuff in the name of God or in the name of Messiah, whatever, it's not saying you have to literally use the actual name of God. It's talking about his personality, his reputation. You're doing it in the reputation of Hashem. Chaim Burr, fascinated by a sign in Chinatown that says, Reb Yankel Dudek's Chinese Laundry, goes in and asks the owner, Yankel Dudek, what sort of a name is that? Is the name of the owner, replies an old Chinese man, standing behind the counter. Me. He says, you? How did that happen that a Chinese man like you has got a Jewish name like Yankel Dudek? Oh, it's simple. Many, many years ago, I must try and get this right now. When come to this country, stand in line at documentation center. We can't do an R, hey? Man in front is Jewish man from Poland. Lady look at him and go, what your name? He say, Reb Yankel Dudek. Then she look at me and go, what your name? I say my name. Same thing.
Yeah.
Same thing. How long is a Chinese man?
How long?
You know him? How long is a Chinese man? It's not a question, it's a statement. How long is a Chinese man? Okay, Mishnah number 9.
Because it can't be long, he must be tall.
I keep getting a flashback of a joke, but I can't remember the full joke about Chinese Jews. I don't know. We'll do it maybe next week.
The one that they said they don't have telephone directories because they ring wrong and you might ring a wrong number.
You might ring a wrong number. Oh. Do you know what they call it when you've got Chinese telephone books on top of each other? Wrong on so many levels. Okay. Mishnah number 9. Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai received the tradition from Hillel and Shammai. He used to say, if you have learned much Torah, take no special credit for it, for yourself, for it was for this that you were created. Don't think you're special if you know a lot of Torah. It's literally the purpose of your life. It's like a fish saying, I can breathe in water. And that's your job. Don't take special credit for it. That's Mishnah number 9. Right, let's read here. Apologies to any Chinese viewers on YouTube. That was just a joke from the book. All right. This is a warning in favor of humility and against too much boastful self-righteousness. The Jew must learn much Torah anyway, because that is his raison d'etre in this world. And thus he cannot take too much credit for doing what he's supposed to be doing in any event. So what's meant by much Torah? Since the Torah is in essence unlimited, the Jew must always extend himself further and further upwards and onwards to greater achievements. The Gerer Rebbe puts a lot of weight on the word much, seeing excess in Torah learning as the path to modesty and the subjugation of feeling of superiority. The more you know, the more humble you will become. But Moshe knew more Torah than anyone, and he was the most humble man on earth. This is the austere line of reasoning behind the Mishnah's Antigonus of Circle. It says, you're blamed if you don't learn Torah, but you get no credit if you do what's expected of you in order to avoid the label of arrogance. At the age of 11, Rav Moshe Feinstein had already learned all of the Nashim and the Nezikin, about the 1,300 pages of the Talmud, at the age of 11. At the age of 11 already. One day he walked into his father's study where his uncle stood up saying, for a boy who knows 2 of the orders of the Mishnah, I have to raise when he enters the room. Rav Moshe's father immediately asked his son to leave the room and return to his brother. What are you doing? Are you trying to kill my boy? You'll turn him into an arrogant person if you stand up when he enters the room. So it's amazing to think that an 11-year-old knew that, but still, don't make him feel arrogant. Learning Torah is literally your job. Pretty cool. There's another rabbi who they actually made him a rabbi. What's his name, man? He's the Hasidic rabbi that organized the structure of Chabad's prayer services. And he's the one that also put together their Siddur. He became a rabbi at the age of 13. At his bar mitzvah, basically, he became a rabbi. I don't know why I can't remember his name now. Yeah, we'll get to it later. Anyway, here's a joke. Rabbonim, rabbis need to have humility and wit. One day, a skeptic approached a rabbi and chastised him for still believing in the Torah. He said, any sane person can see that the Bible contains impossible stuff. Like what? asks the humble rabbi. Well, for example, the story of Balaam's donkey. How could a dumb animal speak? Oh, that's easy, says the rabbi. Just think of it logically. If hundreds of human beings talk like asses, then it's perfectly possible for at least one donkey to talk like a human being. All right. Mishnah number 10. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai had 5 preeminent disciples, namely Rabbi Eliezer ben Hyrcanus, Rabbi Yehoshua ben Hananiah, Rabbi Yosef the priest, Rabbi Shimon ben Natanel, and Rabbi Eliezer ben Arach. So what did they say? Mishnah 11. He used to recount their praise. He used to say, Eliezer ben Hyrcanus, he is a plastered well that never loses a drop. Yehoshua ben Hananiah, happy is the one who gave him birth. Yosef the priest, that is a pious man. Shimon ben Natanel is a man who fears sin. And Eliezer ben Arach is an ever-flowing spring. Those are nice compliments, eh? Imagine your rabbi says that about you.
Except that one, happy the one who gave him birth. That's one, it's nothing about him. I wonder if there's something behind it.
What's his name?
Yehoshua ben Hananiah.
Oh, man. We must go check last year's commentary. Is he not the one whose mother carried him in the cot into the yeshivas? When he was still a newborn, she had him in the cots in the yeshivas. And he was known for his respect for his parents. In fact, when his mother climbed off the bed, he would put his hands on the floor so she could walk in his hands instead of on the floor. I think it's in there. Okay, so we're reading here, Mishnah 2:11. Right, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. So the Mishnah recognizes and celebrates diversity in his 5 central disciples, his spiritual heirs, signaling out a unique quality in each that surpasses all the others. This concept, which shuns universal conformity, places Ben Hyrcanus and Ben Arach on a pedestal of excellence to which all should aspire, and yet even they had different approaches to their Torah study. Rabbi Eliezer was the epitome of concentration and retention. That's why he's called a plastered well that never loses a drop. I forget the stuff I've said 5 minutes ago. This guy has never forgot a thing in his life. Rabbi Eliezer constantly sought the independence of new frontiers of wisdom. Thus the former preserved the teachings of the past, whilst the latter was concerned with the teachings of the future. Both were masters. Eliezer was known for his breadth of knowledge. Eliezer was unmatched in sharpness and creativity and had a unique, probing, questioning mind. Which one is better or superior then? Neither, because there's a need for both types of Torah study, complementing each other, playing off of each other, and inspiring one another to even greater goals. And then there's the ultimate tribute. Fortunate is she who bore him, showered on Rabbi Yehoshua, that he gave his mother much Yiddish and nachas. Yehoshua's mother was one of the most resolute, intense, and devout Yiddish mamas in all of the rabbinical texts. So determined was she to ensure that a boy grew up in the fidelity of a Torah life, that she would place his crib near the base midrash, so that he would hear nothing but words of Torah from his infancy. And they say that there was one of those miracles, one of the great miracles of in history was that he never cried as a baby whenever the rabbi was giving a teaching. My kids don't do that. I don't know what the problem is. Cheers, have a lucky week. Alright, so here's the joke. Help, help! Feiger frantically calls to Atzola. My 2-year-old just swallowed a tiny magnet. What should I do? Don't worry about it, ma'am. He'll be fine. Are you positive? How will I know for sure? Well, just stick him to the fridge, and when he falls off, you'll know. That's a cool one. Alright, Mishnah 12. We'll just read it. He used to say, if all the sages of Israel were on one scale of a balance and Eliezer ben Hyrcanus is in the other, he would outweigh them all. I think last year when we studied the Pirkei Avot, we did a deep dive on this guy. I believe this guy was a believer in Yeshua. This Eliezer ben Hyrcanus. I think there's a bunch of stuff that points to him actually quoting some of Yeshua's teachings as well. However, Abba Saul said in his name, if the sages of Israel, including Eliezer ben Hyrcanus, were on one scale of a balance, and Eliezer ben Arach in the other, he would outweigh all of them. Mishnah 13. He said to them, go and see which is the right way to which one should cling. Rabbi Eliezer said, you should have a good eye, which means generosity of spirit. Rabbi Yehoshua said, you must have a good companion. Rabbi Yosef said, you must have a good neighbor. Rabbi Shimon said, one who considers the consequences. And Rabbi Elazar said, a good heart. So then he said to them, I prefer the answer of Eliezer ben Arach. For his view, the one with a good heart, includes all of your views as well. If you've got the good heart, it'll influence your eye, it'll influence your neighbors, it'll influence everything about you. One who considers the way the consequences come, it'll influence the way that you talk even. So that's why he likes them. That outweighs all of their opinions. Okay, let's read what it says about this one. Right. Rabbi Yochanan urges his top 5 students to go out from the Beis Midrash before giving him an answer to his question as to which was the most important quality that a person should have. In other words, however pious and learned you are, you may still be distancing yourself from the folks that you're supposed to be serving. What's good inside the yeshiva halls isn't necessarily good at the market stalls. So the foremost Torah scholars in the Beis Midrash would have to go out amongst the common folk to help them decide what the best answer was for their Rebbe. And the winner is, you must have a good heart. Yehuda Halevi sang how the heart was a harp, and the Yiddishists credited the heart as having better sight than your eyes do. And King Solomon, it proved the presence of a happy person. But what exactly does having a good heart mean? Don't ask your cardiologist. Judaism views the heart as the primary source of emotions and desires, your aspirations, your inspirations. Thus, to acquire a good, caring heart means to discipline one's sensitivities towards positive Judaic qualities. This Mishnah, after elevating a good heart over everything else, reveals an interesting fact. None of Rabbi Yochanan's 5 disciples chose the same midah, chose the same character trait. Proof that each one of his disciples were different, with different backgrounds, different ambitions, and different visions. There were 5 approaches to what's the best midah in the Torah, and they all are legitimately acceptable. At the golf course on Sunday, Bernie's about to putt when a funeral procession begins to roll by the golf course. He straightens up, takes his hat off, holds it over his heart, and stands silently until the funeral procession passes, and then resumes his game. "Boy," says his golf partner, "that was very thoughtful of you to do that." "Ah," says Bernie, "it's the least I could do. Tomorrow we would have been married for 25 years. So, you see he's got a piece of lemon there in his hand over here. You've got to take these jokes with a twist of humor, okay? Tomorrow we would have been married for 25 years. My book hour. Alright, donkey. Alright, that was Mishnah number 12. Alright, so 13.
Yeah.
No, that was 13.
13, yeah.
No, it's 2:14. He said to them, "Go and see which is the wrong way that one should avoid." So Rabbi Eliezer said the wrong way is an evil eye, which means to be envious. Rabbi Yahushua said an evil companion. Rabbi Yosef said an evil neighbor. And Rabbi Shimon said one who borrows and does not repay. For borrowing from a person is like borrowing from God. As it is said, the wicked borrows and does not repay, but the righteous one is gracious and does repay. Rabbi Eliezer said an evil heart. Then he said to them, once again, I prefer the answer of Eliezer ben Erach, for his view includes all of yours. Okay, so this is another negative one. An evil eye. What does the evil eye mean? We find this term used even in the Gospels a bunch of times, right? Yeshua talks about having an evil eye. Paul as well. The Tiferet Israel links this evil eye, or in Hebrew it's called an ayin hara. Have you ever heard of ayin hara? An ayin hara is an evil eye. He compares it to jealousy, resentment, and envy. In another Mishnah, a rabbi agrees with his colleague, saying, envy, appetite, and ambition all lead to ruin. One Midrash gives a marriage tip, saying envious wives ruin their husbands. But another Midrash comes to the rescue of the envy's reputation, saying, without envy, the world could not abide, for none would marry or build a house in the first place. The quality of envy became an irresistible target. It made the bones rotten, says Proverbs. It slayed the foolish, says Job. When stirred with anger, it shortens your life, says Ben Sirach. And there is no cure for envy, adds the 14th century scholar Bachya ben Asher in his Kad HaKemach. When one judges everything negatively, one is not satisfied with what one has. He becomes jealous of others, evaluates other people in a negative fashion, and comes to doubt one's teachers and God himself. This Mishnah is a subtle reminder of the consequences of suspicion and assumptions, in that one should always see the good in everything and be quick to give others the benefit of the doubt. In 1887, when the Warsaw Rav Ishikar Dov Halevi Horowitz published his Mishle Yisachar, he described envy as having 1,000 eyes, but none with correct vision. Always looking at other stuff, not looking at them properly. The evil eye metaphor, the ayin hara, is a challenge of character over cynicism, a warning that its adherence leads to an inability to make and maintain lasting friendships. Envy destroys any friendship. So the rabbi asked Mendy one day, how how come I never see you in shul anymore? Well, Rabbi, to tell you the truth, when I go, I envy those who think they know Hebrew. Then they think they can learn well. They think that they are better than everyone else. Frankly, the shul is full of hypocrites, he says. Don't worry, Mendy, he says. There's always room for one more. Yeah. Join the party. Okay, Mishnah number 15. Each of the disciples said three things. Rabbi Eliezer said, let the honor of your fellow be as precious to you as your own. Do not be easily provoked to anger. Slow to anger, right? Repent one day before you die. When you're going to die? You don't know, so you must repent every day. He also said, warm yourself by the fire of the sages, but be careful of their glowing coals, lest you get burned. For their bite is the bite of a fox, and their sting is the sting of a scorpion. Their hiss is the hiss of a serpent, and all their words are like fiery coals. How do you say that about the rabbis? That sounds dodgy, doesn't it? Okay, let's see what the commentary says here. So this Mishnah's insight is universal. To rule one's anger is well. To prevent it is even better. Even as the famous man of words Daniel Webster preached, keep cool because anger is not an argument. Said the Kotzker Rebbe, I conquered my anger long ago and I placed it in my pocket. This is why I don't allow it to consume me. If I need it, then I'll take it out. So today's anger, they say, is better spent tomorrow. Hatred and strife have been around since the days of Cain and Abel, which was the motive behind the Torah's first homicide in Cain's rage at being offended, which is why Rabbi Yonah approaches anger as a powerful yet normal part of a human's DNA. In fact, Moshe's entree onto the stage of Jewish history occurs in a moment of anger. He saw the Egyptian beating the Israelite, and anger at his people's constant whining about lack of water is what causes Moshe to strike the rock, as a result of which he forfeits his dream of entering the promised land. Through anger, heroes fall. That would have been the headline of that time. It is this episode that motivated the Talmud to point to rage as causing wisdom to depart from the wise and prophecy to depart from the prophet. The Mishnah uses its words carefully, advising others not to avoid anger but just to temper their temper. This ability for self-control, to bite one's upper lip before exploding in blind rage, frustration and fury, is a true reflection of a person's character. Can you really stop getting angry? That initial moment where someone makes you angry, there's nothing you can do about that. That's a natural human response. But letting it out, that's the only thing you can control. You must try and make sure that it stays over here. So is there an explicit prohibition against anger in the Torah? No, there isn't. Yet Judaism still considers hot tempers and violent passion destructive vehicles that snatch away wisdom and weaken your soul. So be slow to anger. Bernie and his wife are having a family argument, and in a desperate attempt to make amends, he offers his wife a 2-week vacation to France. She declines. He then offers her a brand new car. She declines. He then offers her to renovate the kitchen. No, she screams, that's not what I want. So what do you want, asks Bernie. A divorce, she says. Ah, says Bernie, I haven't budgeted to spend that much. Okay, number 16. Rabbi Yoshua said, the evil eye, or envy, the evil impulse and hatred of humankind drive a person out of this world. The saying of evil eye, I told you what was ayin hara, right? So ayin hara, so you'll find many times today, especially people that are very superstitious. There's old Yiddish mamas and the old Sephardic grandmothers, when they're very superstitious. Whenever they do something, if they say, for example, I hope your kids will be, successful one day, they'll end off the sentence by saying, Kain ayin hara, meaning without an evil eye. They've got the superstition that you must block out the evil eye, envy and stuff like that, because it'll destroy. It's very superstitious. It's something I try to stay away from completely, but it exists, just so you know, if you've ever heard it before. Right, touch wood, basically the same thing, eh? All right. Now this Mishnah narrows the negative qualities or evils of one's character down to 3. An evil eye, which is jealousy, evil inclination, which is lust, and hatred of others, defined by Rashi as baseless hatred, sinas chinam. These 3 character traits are basically the same. They're synonyms for selfishness. By declaring that these character shortcomings remove a person from the world, Rabbi Yehoshua is warning Jews that their presence is a force of destruction. Meanwhile, Rabbi Israel Lipschitz, the Tiferet Israel, identifies them as three corresponding traits that undermine the Mishnah's delineation of the three foundations of the world, which were Torah, service of God, and acts of loving kindness. Now, the concept of ayon hara first appears in the post-biblical period, where it says he cast his eye on him and he died, which is why after Rav visits a cemetery, he believes that 99 people die because of an evil eye, for each one who dies of natural causes. This is the source of the Yiddish expression Kain ayin hara. I spoke about that now, hey? In what we ask that no evil eye should affect the health or the wealth of a person. But another Mishnah seems to reverse this advice, saying, don't be wicked in your own eyes, because too much self-criticism and humility is also unhealthy. These rabbis saw the evil eye as a metaphor for grudge, for greed, and for envy, and relate how Alexander the Great once visited Eden and was given an eyeball. He weighed it against all of his gold and silver, but the eye was heavier than all of his gold and silver. Have you ever heard that story before? That's a weird story. I wish Becca was here, because in the Nordic traditions as well, they've almost got what's his name? Who's their god? Odin or something. He also had this eye, didn't he? She told me the story once. He's got this eye as well. He sends the hawks out to go look at stuff. That's probably where the story is based upon as well. One of those crazy stories. Anyway. So while he put this the eyeball and all of his gold and silver in a scale, and so the eye was heavier, he was told, put some dust on it, so the scales would tip in the favor of the eye. What's the lesson here? The human eye is never satisfied. The more it sees, the more it wants, until finally the dust covers it in the grave. And so our sages promoted its opposite, which is a good eye, the ayin tova, in a spirit of generosity and goodwill, always seeing the best in people, not the worst in others. That's interesting. Cool. All right, so here's the joke. Lenny's car is wrecked in a crash, and his wife Susie calls the insurance company. We had that car insured for $5,000 and I want my money. Whoa there, Susie, the agent replies. Insurance doesn't quite work like that. We first ascertain the value of the insured article, and then we provide you with a new one of comparable worth. Susie thinks for a few minutes, and then she says, in that case, I'd like to cancel the policy I took out on my husband. That's cold. Oh, what's he worth? Okay, Mishnah number 17. These jokes are for couples that have been through thick and thin. Siva Sakasot. There we go. Rabbi Yossi said, let the property of your fellow be as precious to you as your own. Prepare yourself to study the Torah, for it does not come to you as an inheritance. And let all your deeds be for the sake of heaven. He wasn't promoting communism here when he says, let your property be as someone else's. All right, so let's see what they say about this one. All right, the lesson. What is the lesson of this Mishnah? If you respect your own assets, then you must respect other people's money and property as well. Or as the Yiddish cynics phrase it, if you rub elbows with a rich man, you'll get a hole in your sleeve. If you have money, wrote the Shalom Aleichem, you're wise and handsome and you can sing. But does that help you with your Torah learning? Told that a certain Jew had acquired great wealth, the sage asked, yes, but has he also acquired the days in which to spend that wealth? Or will he have a short life? Occupying yourself with Torah study for its own sake, notes the Mishnah's Rabbi Meir, makes the world worthwhile. And not just for one's own sake. The sake of heaven, which is a common Torah theme that rests on the original directive that we shall know God in all his ways, was a favorite precept of the 7th Lubavitcher Rebbe, in that a mundane mitzvah, if not performed with deep godly intent, remains a mitzvah diluted to dreary dullness and not the ideal level of holiness. When the Mishnah asks the question, who is rich? Ben Zoma answers it by saying, his answer comes not in financial, but in the psychological terms. He says, one who is rich is one who is happy with his lot. This is not a tirade against ambition or drive, but a nod and a wink that fortune is at times measured in such simple things as peace and serenity. But the final word goes to Nachman Kasover. Since people think of business while they are in shul, is it too much to ask that they think of God while they do their business? Rabbi, the congregant asks, how come you're always talking business when I, a businessman, am always talking about spiritual matters when I am not at work? Good question, the rabbi replies. You have discovered one of the principles of human nature. And what principle is that, Rabbi? He says, people like to discuss things they know nothing about. That's a burn. Okay, number 18. Rabbi Shimon said, be meticulous in reciting the Shema and the Amidah. Notice that the word Amidah is in brackets there. Because in the Hebrew it doesn't say Amidah, it just says the prayer. Hatafila. So the Amidah is the most important prayer in our service, so we literally just call it Hatafila, the prayer. So that's why even in the New Testament, in Acts, when they talk about they went to the temple to do the prayer, it's in the singular, not in the plural. It's talking about the Amidah, that they were constantly doing the Amidah every single day in the temple, the apostles, after Yeshua's resurrection. When you pray, do not do so as a fixed routine, but as a plea for mercy and grace before God. As it is said, for he is gracious and compassionate, slow to anger, abounding in kindness and renouncing punishment. Do not be evil in your own eyes. Right. Do not be evil in your own eyes. Okay, why does the Mishnah separately specify saying the Shema and then reciting prayers, as if there were two distinct obligations? Because the Shema is not a prayer per se, but in itself a solemn standalone duty to be performed at the right time and the right place. Prayer, on the other hand, was to be free utterances from your heart, inspirational, self-motivated, reflecting what each individual knew had to be expressed at any moment, any time, and any place, and not regulated by perfunctory lip service. When you pray, said Bunyan, better that your heart be without words than your words be without heart. Prayer is inherently internal. It is not the actual words of the prayers, but the thoughts and the sincerity behind them that are being articulated. Whereas the Shema is the first prayer taught to a Jewish child upon rising in the morning and going to sleep at night, and the last words that you recite before you die. Thus the Torah enlarges the ayin and the dalet of the Shema in order to spell out the word aid. Aid means witness. In that by declaring the Shema, comprised of three sections of the Torah, the Hear, O Israel, the If you listen to my commandments, and the You shall make the tzitz part, Jews are testifying to the oneness of God. By separating it from regular prayer, Rabbi Shimon acknowledges that the Kriyas Shema is the primary Judaic desire and plea, Israel's ultimate unambiguous declaration of allegiance and manifestation of faith, because of its opening verse where it says, Hear, O Israel, the Lord is one, which is why it can be said in any language you want. It doesn't have to be said in Hebrew. Now the Rebbetzin was in labor for hours, and the end was not in sight. So her husband quickly put together a minyan and started davening the Tehillim, praying the Psalms. 30 minutes later, the Rebbetzin gave birth to a baby, and a few minutes later, a second baby. When the nurse told her that another baby was on its way, she quickly called her husband and screamed, saying, Rabbi, for God's sake, stop praying. There's another version of the joke about the guy that was struggling to get, him and his wife were struggling to fall pregnant, so he went and saved up all his money, took a trip to the Kotel, to the Western Wall, wrote the prayer on a piece of paper there, put it in there, asked Hashem, please give us a child. Flew back, the wife fell pregnant, and they had sextuplets. And then she fell pregnant again, and they had quadruplets. And she fell pregnant again, and she got triplets. And one day, the rabbi comes to the Western Wall, and he sees this guy digging around on the floor on the Western Wall, going in between all the bricks. He says, what are you doing? He says, I'm looking for my prayer, I'm going to get rid of it. Same idea. All right, where are we now? 19. Rabbi Eliezer said, be diligent in the study of Torah, know how to answer a heretic, know for whom you labor and who is your employer, who will pay you the reward of your work. This heretic that it mentions here, by the way, if you can check in the Hebrew, it's called an epikuros. An epikuros was like one of those Greek philosophers in the day of Paul. So the New Testament also uses the word an Epicurean, the epikuros. They existed in Paul's day as well. So these are the guys that Paul was arguing with there when he was in Athens, for example, the Epicureans. So it's the same time frame. These rabbis were in the same time frame as Paul as well. That's why they discuss this stuff. All right, we've only got like 2 left that we're going to do. This was number 19, hey? Right, let's read here. The Mishnah challenges us to be prepared to answer an argumentative challenges that are posed by heretics. Why do we care? Why take a heretic seriously? The Talmud describes a debate, more like a confrontation between Rabbi Avahu and a heretic who proved that God was a priest and thus could not possibly have buried Moses. We thought about that. A Cohen is not allowed to touch a dead body, right? Is God allowed to touch a dead body? The entire back and forth from both sides is an incoherent, absurd exercise in futility. Yet our sages dutifully recorded this exchange for us. Why? To show that no question must ever be ignored. Ben Arach considered it a chulul Hashem for a person not to be able to answer an Epicurus, a Jewish heretic, the term being the Hebrew equivalent of an Epicurus, the ancient Greek philosopher and founder of the philosophy that says, eat, drink and be merry, for tomorrow we will die. Did this way of thinking actually attract Jews? Yes, it did. The intelligentsia of 3rd century Alexandrian Jews and Jews of Judea embraced the atheism of this new religion, accepting the anti-Torah idea that pleasure is the beginning and end of life. The rabbis considered the Jewish heretics such a danger in their midst that they increased the number of blessings in Amidah from 18 to 19 in the daily Shemoneh Esrei, the daily Amidah prayer, to include a blessing regarding the heretic. It's called the Birkas Haminim. So even in Paul's day, this is why he writes with his letters to the Thessalonians, to the Corinthians, this was the big thing. People had this idea. The Greeks were teaching them that life is all about multiplying or getting as much pleasure out of it as you can. Right? So that was the world at that stage. Every afternoon, they only worked half day in those days. Hey? So that in the Roman cities, you would only work half day, and the second half of the day, you would go to the bathhouse. You go prance around there naked, do all sorts of horrible things to try and get as much pleasure in life as possible. This was the world they live in. So this is why Paul's constantly writing these letters, and he sounds so angry when he writes to these guys, the Corinthians, doing all these horrible things. But to them, this is what the world's doing, man. This is what it's all about now. So yeah, that's unfortunate. All right, so here's the joke. The rabbi, shocked to see that Abe, the heretic, came into shul one Shabbat morning with a St. Bernard dog, runs over to him and says, "Hey, what are you doing here with a dog in the shul?" "Rabbi, my dog came to pray." "Are you crazy? He can't come in here. Dogs don't pray." "But Rabbi, this dog does. Just watch." So Abe nods to the dog, who takes out the yarmulke, a talit, and a siddur, and starts davening. The rabbi regains his composure and coolly turns to Abe, saying, "Maybe your dog also wants to go to rabbinical school." "Well, Rabbi," says Abe, "perhaps you can talk to him. He wants to become a doctor instead." Yeah, it's a silly joke, that one. All right. Came from his bar mitzvah. Right, Mishnah number 20. You know, one of the towns that our sages are well known for, where there was like great sages that went and studied, was called Bnei Brak. So that's where these dogs come from. Okay, Mishnah 20. Really? Oh. Have you been there before or not? I still want to go one day. Bnei Brak. Isn't that where, I think that's where the city where they had that, in the Pesach Seder, so the Haggadah we used this year was a streamlined one, so it doesn't have the whole discussion. But the more traditional Haggadahs have the story of a bunch of rabbis that stayed up all night discussing the miracles of Egypt. And then next thing they knew, their students came in and said, "Hey, it's time to go do the morning Shema." And they realized they've been discussing the whole night long the miracles of Hashem. So that story is actually in the Haggadah. You're supposed to recite it every year as well in the more traditional Haggadahs. I think that happened in the city of Bnei Brak. Anyway, question number 20. Rabbi Tarfon said, "The day is short, the task is great. The laborers are lazy, but the reward is much. And the master is insistent." Does it sound familiar? It's basically a quote from the New Testament, eh? Yeah, same thing. Right, the harvest time. So let's see what we have to say about this Mishnah.
Just a correction, he's a South African Orthodox Jew who's got a WhatsApp channel.
Oh.
So I speak to him once or twice. Being a woman, I don't correspond with him.
Yeah, you don't want to burn up in fire. Spontaneously combust. Okay. So this Mishnah sounds a bit like Ecclesiastes. It's depressing, fleeting, life is urgent and short. Not to despair, however. There is a heavenly bounty at the end of it. The reward is great, it tells us. But only if one makes the right lifestyle choices. Life and death I've placed before you, the blessing and the curse. Choose life. Now, with a sense of urgency, Rabbi Tarfon reminds us that there exists a godly reward, not necessarily in this life, but there is one for learning much Torah. Shmuel Usida, a 16th century Tzfat-born Talmudist, wailed by saying, "There is no loss like the loss of time." The ultimate 21st century challenge is how to squeeze more than 24 hours out of a day. A peculiar desire that laid the mother egg of all illusions, that since time cannot be stretched, it must be compressed into brevity, faster segments or sound bites. Around the world in 80 seconds, blares the Fox TV News. Nanosecond emails, speed dialing and speed dating, fast food restaurants, quickie book solutions, how to kill time. And in Arkansas, there's a drive-through church for those who want to experience religion but don't want to get out of their cars. Can you believe that? There was a new guy here at Shul today, tall, very tall, dark guy. He works at Chick-fil-A. Do you guys know what Chick-fil-A is? In America, it's God's chicken, they call it. It's like KFC, but it's like only run by Christians. They only hire Christians, and they're closed on Sundays because everyone has to go to church. How cool is that? So here's a drive-through church. So you go to the church first, then you go to Chick-fil-A, and then you go home. Not so fast, whispers the rabbinic wisdom of the Pirkei Avot. There is a time and a place for everything, to which we must add a cautionary note from Isaiah that says, "I will hasten it, but only in its time," says Isaiah. But when is its time? No one knows when the redemption will come. Yet all understand that failure to seize the moment leads to time wasted, obliterated, lost forever, and never to return. So Surila asks her roommate, "So, how was your date?" "Terrible," she says. "He showed up in his 1932 Rolls Royce." "Wow," she says. "That's a very expensive car. In fact, the car is timeless. What's so bad about that?" She said, "He's the original owner of the 1932 Rolls Royce." Oh, toppie. Okay, last one, 21. He used to say, "It is not for you to complete the task."
A classic himself.
Yeah. What's a sugar daddy is the word, eh? He used to say, "It's not for you to complete the task, but neither are you free to stand aside from it. If you have studied much Torah, you will be given great reward. For your employer will faithfully reward your work. Know, though, that the reward of the righteous is granted in the time to come." Not right now. So here's the final one for today. Right. On the one hand, this Mishnah tells us that it's more important to begin a task than it is to finish it. But Rabbi Tarfon is contradicted by such other sages as Rav and Yossi, who say, if you started it, you should finish it. Chama ben Chanina and Eliezer ben Pedat say, he who does not finish what he began should be disposed of. And the author of the Seder Eliyahu, Zuta, who paints that the Jew who starts but doesn't finish he paints this with the broad brush of a sinner. So Rabbi Tarfon over here is simply saying that it's not good for a man to be idle, that wasting of your time is actually a curse. Another Mishnah identifies idleness as the cause for pushing one down the slippery slope towards madness and lewdness. And Rashi contends that the greater the effort, the greater the reward. In the immortal words of David Belasco's fictional character in Return of Peter Grimm, we mustn't waste time because that's the stuff life's made of. There's a startling midrash that defines the desire to kill some time as a major sin. So grievous, in fact, that it actually leads to death, implying that idleness is the Judaic equivalent of suicide. The Maharal, a vigorous opponent of lethargy and laziness, was convinced that inactivity is incompatible with spirituality, and frequently argued that the only remedy to overcome its stifling effect is the rabbinic adage known as mitzvah haba'a liyadcha al tachmitzena. Catch that? When a mitzvah comes to your hand, don't let it become stale. Just jump towards the mitzvahs. So Joey is a lazy young man who, rather than looking for a decent job, is always thinking of how to get rich quick. So one day he calls up his friend. "Hey Moshe, I think I've got it. The perfect idea. An invention for barber shops." So how does it work? Well, it's a machine that you stick your head in. It shaves you in a matter of seconds. Moshe, I will make a fortune. But that's preposterous, Moshe says. Why? It's impossible. Everyone's head is shaped differently. It'll never work. Maybe, says Joey. And he thinks for a few seconds and then yells back, but only at first. Get quick rich scheme. Alright, we always end off by saying, Rabbi Hanania ben Akashya said, the Holy One, blessed is He, wanted to confer merit on Israel. This is why He gave them a copious Torah and many commandments. As it is said, it pleased the Lord for the sake of Israel's righteousness to make the Torah great and glorious. Alright guys, that was chapter 2. Hope you enjoyed it.